Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new TEAM therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Rhonda, I've got to make the most of it because we only have 7 or so episodes left before your grand departure on number 500, and this is 493. So
right.
I thought I'd better get as much juice as I could out of that one.
Okay, well, you're doing really great. You're doing a great job of that. And just want to remind our listeners that this is the Feeling Good podcast. And as David just said, it's episode 493. And you heard a little giggle in the background.
That was me.
So if you've heard that giggle, that means our beloved Matt May is on and that this is an Ask David episode. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Rhonda. Hey, David. It was great to see you.
Really great to see you too, both of you. And I have an endorsement to read from one of your listeners who listens from mainland China. And she wrote, it's an endorsement from Yan Yang, who wrote, "I'm pleased to inform you, Dr. Burns, that your book, Feeling Great, has been ranked number 8 on the new knowledge category of the 2025 DuBain annual book list. DuBain is a platform similar to Goodreads in the United States. The list reflects the most genuine feedback from the market and readers, making it a highly significant list. Additionally, your book, Feeling Great, was awarded the New Science Book Prize earlier this summer. These
Could
two
you repeat that?
The New Discovery Science Book Prize. Thank you.
The New Discovery Science
Book Prize.
Book Prize.
Yeah, right.
That's cool. I could maybe put that from who gave that award?
The DuBain platform is a list.
How do you
Actually,
spell that?
I don't know. It's DU, then BAIN.
DuJane platform in China?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the New Discovery Science Book Prize. I don't know who gave that.
That didn't come from the DuJane platform. That was the number 8 was the DuJane?
Right. DuBain platform.
Okay.
Ranked you number 8 on the new knowledge category. And she said that these 2 honors are meaningful in different ways. One represents an authentic market and read and a read response, while the other underscores the book's value and its broader social impact.
Oh, great.
And she concluded, best regards, Yin Yang.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. She's been just fantastic. They've done a bang-up job of publishing Feeling Great in China. It comes, unlike the U.S. editions, it comes with all kinds of helpful devices, cards and summaries and, little booklets inside and all kinds of things to help readers digest all of this this information. And this might actually bring us to your question, Matt.
Right. David, my question was who should pick up a copy of Feeling Great and who should pick up a copy of Feeling Good? If I had to choose between those, what are the differences and how would I choose?
Well, that's a great question, and it has a fantastic answer. I still recommend Feeling Good to people because even though it's 45 or 50 years old since it was published, and since I wrote that book, it is still working for people as good as ever, and a good 50 or more percent of people, if you hand them a copy of Feeling Good, the new mood therapy, and they're depressed, they'll improve pretty dramatically in 4 weeks. and not really need treatment. This was based on research at University of Alabama Medical Center, where people were coming for treatment for depression. And at the time, they could buy Feeling Good in wholesale for $2.40 a copy. And so they were asking, what's the cheapest way to treat depression? And suppose we just gave people a copy of this book instead of going through the thousands and tens of thousands of dollars for, short or long-term depression treatment. And they were surprised at the results, and they published it in a medical journal, and then there were 9 or 10 replication studies that came up with more or less the same thing. And so it really still works, and it has all the original excitement that I felt at that time, and it's on self-defeating beliefs and cognitive distortions and a lot of themes of perfectionism and love addiction, achievement addiction, and suicidal urges, and there's just so much there. The Feeling Great book has, by way of competitive advantage, all of the research and my 45 years of extensive clinical treatment and innovation. I've been modifying cognitive therapy pretty much every week since it was first developed, since my earliest times going to the Beck seminar when I didn't know anything about it. I started developing new techniques even then. And so they're all in the book Feeling Great. And one big difference is that in the old days of cognitive therapy, we thought everything was cognition. And then over the years, I kind of wised up a little bit and saw the massive importance of motivation, and that's a distinct dimension from cognition. You can't reduce everything to cognition. You can try, but you lose a lot in the translation. And what we've learned is that people get stuck because there's powerful motivational factors that keep us stuck. Like if you're depressed and beating up on yourself, you probably have really high standards. And those high standards may have helped you achieve a tremendous amount in your career. And so you're not going to go about, just throwing your perfectionism away. And so in Feeling Great, there's an entirely new mountain range there, Mount Everest, representing motivation, as well as the mountain ranges, the Colorado Rockies representing cognition and all of those good things. But there's more powerful tools to help you change the way you think and feel, and that's the main difference. But with both books, the question isn't whether or not you buy them and pick them up and read them. I hope you will, because it'll put, I think every time you buy a copy of Feeling Good, it puts like 25 or 35 cents in my pocket, something really huge like that. But what I want to see is people who actually do the written exercises while reading the book, either book, because that's what makes the difference in recovery. You can read about it, but it won't really help you with your moods very much. But if you write down your negative thoughts and identify the distortions and do the cool exercises, you will experience a much deeper level of understanding, as well as have a much improved shot at change.
Thank you. And I still refer back to Feeling Good too. I think my favorite chapter is Dare to be Average.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was really helpful for me to let go of some of my perfectionism. And you had all the reasons to keep, demanding more of oneself and not be content with who we are.
Yeah, yeah.
And address the motivation even in that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember your moment of enlightenment?
Vaguely. I always love to be reminded of it.
Okay,
Then I pop right back in.
Yeah, because it's on that exact theme, and that's been a big theme for me too, to let go of that perfectionism that I was clinging to But as you remember, we used to go to that pizza place in Los Altos when we were supervising, and we'd order some great pizzas. I used to like the kind with that kind of chicken with barbecue sauce,
Yes.
and we'd order our pizzas and talk cases, and 2 hours would go by just really fast. And we were driving back together, and you were driving back to drop me off back at my house, which is a mile and a half or so, or maybe two or 3 miles from downtown Los Altos, and we came to a stop sign, and it was evening. It was getting dark, and you looked at me with serious eyes, and said, "Dr. Burns, I just want you to know that every day I'm trying so hard to become a better and better person." And it was just so sincere, and I look back at you trying to make my eyes just as serious, and and I said, "Matt, I hope you get over that one of these days soon." And then you got it and burst into laughter.
Yeah, I set those high standards down. I never needed them the whole time.
Yeah.
Help me see that. And we just drove off without him.
Yeah. And now we know the joys of mediocrity, the joys of averageness, but that would have sounded like obscene pornographic cursing
Right.
In the early days when we were still addicted to perfectionism.
So you get 25 cents for every copy that you sell. They send you a quarter. So if I have to do laundry, I can come over.
Yeah.
It's a good deal.
Yeah, if I can sell an extra, let's see, 10 or 20 copies, we could do another pizza together one evening.
I love that. Let's do it.
As we split the cost.
As long as Matt splits the cost.
Give a personal size pizza. That sounds great, David. Thank you for answering that question.
Well, one of the things you write about in Feeling Great that you didn't write about in Feeling Good is about the 4 deaths of the ego.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and there's 4 deaths for the therapist and a separate and different 4 deaths for the patient.
Yeah. And that's a hard concept for a lot of people to understand, me included.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which part of it, or do you have trouble understanding?
Well, it's the fundamental challenge is understanding that we don't have a self.
Right. I've never made such a claim myself.
Right. Yeah. It's such a vague sort of Buddhist.
Right.
Yeah. But, wait, ask me that question again.
Well, you said we don't have a self, and that's popular for people to debate about, do we have a self or do we not have a self? But my own thinking on that is different. I think Matt's and I maybe aren't on the same page on this, nor do we need to be. But I just want to confirm once again that you understand that my position is neither of those.
Your position is neither of?
Yes.
When you talk about the death of the self, David, you're talking about like the death of the special self in the case of perfectionism, letting go of the belief that we have some special, better self and the attachment to it. Whereas,
well, that's for sure. That's huge. That's a little different from what I was just now referring to.
Yeah. And
and I was thinking that Rhonda might say, "Well, what are you referring to, David? What is your position?" But
you are reading my mind. So your special self is still existence. I was actually just going to ask you, what are you referring to?
Well, to my way of thinking, and this is very humble, you might think of me as a child or something, like a 4th grader or even a 2nd grader. But when you say we do have a self, or when you say we don't have a self, to my way of thinking, I'm working with my yo-yo here, walking along the sidewalk, and I don't understand what that language means, that I have a self or I don't have a self. So I just reject that kind of dialogue as, to me, being meaningless. Now, it might be meaningful to you, in which case that's fine with me. But when you say to me, Rhonda, if you were to say, I, Rhonda, don't have a self, or I, Rhonda, do have a self, I personally just can't figure out what that might mean. Or to be bolder, I would say, to my ear, those are just meaningless statements. Or as Wittgenstein would say, it's language out of gear. They sound like meaningful sentences in the English language, but they're not. At least to Wittgenstein and David, they're not. He couldn't figure out what they mean either.
And that's a form of enlightenment where you don't get wrapped up in trying to answer meaningless questions.
Yeah.
And you can just let go of them, and then your mind is free.
Thank you. That's a kindly way of putting it. I appreciate that. Yeah. That we're just kind of living our lives today, and it's fun hanging out with the two of you.
Yeah.
And then that's really a great gift.
You're right.
And I don't need esoteric metaphysical language. On top of that, it's kind of humble. We're just here, a little spot in the universe, doing our thing.
Right.
And a few people are listening, maybe 1,000, maybe more, maybe not as many, and they might enjoy also our dialogue, and some might be helped, and those things have a lot of meaning to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sufficient for me. Just like if you were hungry and came across a hot dog stand, you'd be, grateful to get a nice hot dog.
Right. And now you're leaning into another difference between the two books, is that there's a spiritual element in feeling great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you talk about, and we've talked about this many times on the podcast, that when a patient reaches that moment of, their enlightenment or, awareness, they've reached a spiritual enlightenment as well as a psychological one.
Yeah, and I think that was really there in a small way from the very beginning. But the voice of that soft little, kind of philosophical, spiritual dimension has become much stronger in the later years, and has played a bigger role in recovery and causality of depression and anxiety, which always seems to revolve around, that I have a self that's not good enough.
Right.
And once you let go of that idea, it's so freeing. Like say to me, David, I've heard through the grapevine that your self isn't good enough.
Hey, David, I heard through the grapevine that your self isn't good enough.
Oh, it's not. It's absolutely not. What did you have in mind? You mean like if I'm ordering a coffee at a coffee shop, or not good enough to talk to you right now, or I don't know quite what you mean, because I'm not that bright.
Right.
But it's fun hanging out with you guys.
Yeah.
David, I liked hearing that there's been some recent measurement of feeling good efficacy too, and that it sounds like it's continuing to be just as effective and useful for people to read now as it was in 1980. Is that correct?
I think so, yeah. I don't have any evidence to the contrary. I keep getting just as many emails today as ever before. And the book is selling as well as it's ever sold. It's been a bestseller really for 50 years now.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't surprise me. It's like its author, it's aged well. And
yeah.
Thank you for producing both of those amazing works. I think you're helping billions of people.
Yeah. And then out of these 2 books came the app.
Yeah.
And before I went on vacation, you gave me the most recent article that you wrote where you collated data from the app users. And I was wondering, have you submitted your article?
We've submitted it 3 times to the journal Nature, which is pretty much the world's top scientific journal, or so I've been told. And 3 different editors have rejected it, not after scientific review, but they've refused to review it. And so we're trying to figure out, we can go back to a journal like Journal of JMIR, which I've published very humble articles in, recently. That's not too tough, and that might be a nice path of least resistance. But you have to get a scientific review board, and I think part of the thing is that the statistics I do is very sophisticated. Structural equation modeling. I spent 2 full years studying it in Philadelphia when I was in private practice. I got the chance to audit James Arbuckle's course at Temple University on structural equation modeling, and he created the software that I use, and he was a tremendous teacher. And it became very clear to me what it is and how it works. And so I can do really fantastic things with structural equations. But unfortunately, a lot of the field, it's considered, too advanced for most statisticians, to be honest. And so I have to find some people who can comprehend what I'm doing, and then agree to have some top people, review and criticize the article. But that's why I've been kind of happy to publish stuff in Psychology Today, because we've had 8 articles published there in the last couple of months. And it's not professionally reviewed there, but they do review the articles and critique them. And at least it allows us to get some of these exciting new developments out into the public domain fairly quickly. And there have been just so, it's like I feel like I'm in a cornucopia of discovering things almost on a weekly basis that are really profoundly important in terms of understanding how people change. But, I've got 2 really high-powered academic articles that I couldn't get reviewed by Nature. One of them agreed to review it in one of their lesser journals. But at the time, my ego got in the way. And I thought, oh, no, it's got to be a top Nature journal with a high impact factor. But now I'm just looking around for where would be a decent place. And Journal of Medical Internet Research, JMIR, is fairly prestigious and kind of up to the minute. And so I'm thinking that might be a good target.
I may be throwing help at you, David, but I'm just curious, have you tried, can AI understand the statistics that you're doing? Can it explain it?
Have we tried what?
Can AI understand the statistics that you're doing, or present it in a way that is more understandable?
Oh, it's well, perhaps. I've gotten some collaboration with AI, and I've taught it quite a bit about statistics, and it's taught me quite a bit about statistics and how to communicate. I think the articles are really masterpieces of communication, to be honest with you. But you have to, have a mindset of comprehending mathematical modeling or statistical modeling, and
so it's a beautiful masterpiece, but it's hard for people to understand it and see it.
Oh yeah. I've suggested send it to James Arbuckle for review, and
okay.
He'll tell you, he'll understand this article and tell you its importance. In fact, he took the article from my first book, Feeling Good,
Yeah.
He got access to that data that they got from the University of Alabama and put it in his structural equation modeling textbook as an example.
Oh, wow. That's
With the
fantastic.
data for students to analyze and learn how to do structural equation modeling. So he would be very sympathetic to the cause. But finding people who understand structural equations is, there's a lot of them around, but proportionally they're a tiny percentage.
Yeah.
And who's James Arbuckle?
He's Mr. Arbuckle's son.
Why would you want him to review your book? I mean, your article.
Because, he was the person I studied structural equation modeling for 2 years in Philadelphia. He's one of the world's top statisticians. He's considered a mathematical genius. And he was just the nicest guy in the world. And I would say, here's someone who understands what I'm doing.
Well, have you talked about what the article's about? Not just whether it's getting published or not?
In the abstract, you probably read the abstract.
No, I mean, have you talked about it on the podcast? What's the article about?
Well, we're on a podcast right now, I believe.
I don't believe you've talked about that previously on this podcast.
Well, we could talk about it on a podcast. I'd be glad to do that because we've got amazing, even new research.
I'm asking you.
Really exciting stuff.
Can you summarize a little bit of it right now?
Well, I can several things I can summarize right now if you like. Thank you for the invite. But we've got to get back to our Ask David question. But and I appreciate what you're doing. One discovery, there's for 2,000 years, people have argued about what's the cause of depression. And there's all these lists of explanations that people give, and none of them, like the chemical imbalance in the brain, or due to poverty, or being unloved, or some dietary thing. And all we can say with certainty is that all of those causes can be proven false. None of them has been validated. They're just a lot of. I'm not going to swear anymore, but what I used to call, BS and worse. And but 2,000 years ago, Epictetus said that negative thoughts cause depression. And some people got it and some people didn't. And then other people claim, no, negative feelings cause negative thoughts. And that's called a circular causality problem. And it cannot, you can prove mathematically that it's impossible to solve with what's called ordinary least squares. And ordinary least squares is the 95% of all statistics is based on that. But ordinary least squares can't solve the circular causality problem. And students learn that in their first statistics class. If two variables are correlated, A and B, well, you don't know if A causes B or B causes A, or if some third unknown variable causes both of them simultaneously. And you can solve it with ordinary least squares, but you'll get what's called inconsistent estimates, which means that the values you get will depend entirely on your database and will have nothing to do with the actual causal parameters. They can be infinitely biased, and the standard errors of the estimates can be infinitely biased. But you can prove that you can solve that problem under certain conditions with structural equation modeling. And so that's the first thing that we did was I developed two databases, one with our 2023 beta test that was 290 beta testers, and then about 6,000 commercial users since that time. And wow. I independently estimated what's the causal effect of cognitions, which we measured with great accuracy, What are you thinking? How much do you believe your negative thoughts at this moment? And then how strong are your negative feelings measured at this moment, not over the past 2 weeks? I mean, that back tests and those are worthless because our app works so fast, and TEAM CBT works so fast. At the very moment you change your belief, at that very instant, your feelings will change.
Mm-hmm.
So you need very fast acting scales. And so we developed super accurate fast-acting scales to measure both belief in negative thoughts as well as intensity of negative feelings. And the data showed overwhelmingly, and both data sets were independent of each other, and they came up with exactly the same parameter estimates, but within the small standard errors of the estimates. There were no statistical differences, that there's a huge causal effect of belief in negative thoughts on negative feelings. And as a clinician, it appears obvious to all of us that if you believe, I'm a worthless human being, like Elise did, one of my first patients who had
Mm-hmm.
tried to commit suicide because she believed she was a worthless human being because she'd never accomplished anything meaningful. She believed that thought and ended up in the intensive care unit of our hospital. And then they referred her to me for follow-up care, and she was one of my first cognitive therapy patients. And the focus under Beck's supervision, I was consulting with him, how can I treat this woman, was to get her to stop believing she was a worthless human being. And I kept trying stuff that didn't work. And then I found a technique that didn't work, and bingo, her depression suddenly vanished. And I said, wow, this theory is really correct. And we've seen that. As long as people keep believing their negative thoughts, they'll continue to be upset. The moment they stop believing them, it'll disappear. And that's not an easy thing to do, as you both know.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, we've proven that finally after 2,000 years. And that article is waiting for review at JMIR. As soon as we give them the green light, they're going to review it.
Wow, awesome.
So that's one thing. And then there have been tremendous discoveries in addition to that. For example, a lot of people have said, well, you've never had a placebo control study for TEAM CBT, so, we can't take it seriously. And so I spoke with Irving Kirsch, who was the associate director of the Placebo Studies Institute at Harvard Medical School. And we asked the question in a conversation when we were developing our 2023 beta test, would it be possible to have a placebo test within a naturalistic study so you wouldn't have to pay for a control group? Because at the time we were asking around how much would it cost to have a control group to compare our app to. And I found a fellow who used to do that stuff for drug companies, and he estimated, $30 million for a tiny study, and
Wow.
130 for a modest-sized study. And that's impossible. But then Irving Kirsch and I said, well, suppose we ask people to predict how much they'll improve with the app using the same 7-item scale that we've been using. And how depressed are you now? How guilty are you now? How inadequate are you? It's on a 0 to 100 on all of these. And then how much do you think you'll be after using the app? And everybody made, their predictions. That was their expectation. And then I was able to use structural equation modeling to turn that into a variable and insert it in the model so it could compete with the app, which was based on changing cognitions. And so we were able to say, what's the size of the placebo effect and what's the size of the true app effect? For the first time. It's never been done before. And estimating the placebo effect with precision has never been done before. And it's never been done before in a naturalistic study. It was thought to be impossible. That's why historically they came up with controlled outcome studies. But controlled outcome studies pretty much suck for tons of reasons. For example, if you're trying to measure the effect of a psychedelic, okay, well, how are you going to have a controlled control group?
That's exactly the problem with the MAPS MDMA studies, because if you're not taking the MDMA, you know it.
Yeah, that's right. And if you're on LSD, you're stoned, and you know it. There's no,
right.
Placebo going on there. But yet we could use this technique within a psychedelic study or a drug company study to test accurately the placebo effect. And what we saw in our app was there was a big placebo effect. That the more people believed they were going to improve with our app, the more they improved. And the amount of improvement they predicted was spot on. It was within, like if they thought they were, the group on a 0 to 100, say the group started at 45 on 7 different emotions, which is very, moderate and to pretty damn severe. And then the group mean, on like guilt would be 15 and depression would be 17. What you predicted, the anxiety would be 13.2. Well, the actuals were within like a point or two of that. Like if the prediction for the group was 15.4, the actual would be like 15.3. Like not statistically different. And it was unbelievable. And they made these predictions as much as 10 weeks before ever using the app. So it wasn't a memory effect or something of that nature. But and that explained a certain amount of the outcome variance was due to this placebo effect. But what we also proved was that the true app effect was 3 to 4 times greater than that.
Wow.
And that the app effect and the placebo effect were completely separable. They were different from each other. And so we discovered for the first time we don't have to be afraid of the of the placebo effect. We want a big placebo effect because it's the cherry on the cake.
Right.
You see, you've got all the benefit of the app plus your own expectation. And we have, I'd say, a freight train of discoveries on that level of magnitude that have come out of this research. Another huge one that occurred to me just a few weeks ago when I was jogging, I had this unusual effect that I hadn't quite paid attention to in our data on our 2023 Feeling Good app. That, the TEAM CBT works in the here and now, right?
Right.
And even if you have a past trauma patient, of which I've treated, at least 60, 80, 100 severe trauma patients, I always treat them right. What's something you want help with today that's going on in your life right now, and work on your negative thoughts right now. And then I've always said, and it was a puzzle to me, that, when I do this, I've never had a trauma patient that didn't recover in a single session, a 2-hour session. And I never paid attention to that except to vaguely note it. And all these people, I don't know, who's that guy that was kicked out of Harvard who wrote that book of, the body knows the score.
Bessel van der Kolk.
Oh, yeah. I think he and others are claiming you've got to have all these specialized techniques focusing on the past, and psychodynamic therapists focus on the past, and people so fashionable say you've got to work out your past traumas, or it's just a superficial solution. And then I looked at the data because I had data on the patients. How are you feeling right now? And then there was that for our first study was just a 3-day study with the Feeling Good app, the early, before we had AI even. And we got great results in 3 days. But then I had this other variable on the past. how you've been feeling in the past 2 years. And our population was very severe over the previous 2 years. They were estimating moderate to severe levels of chronic depression and anxiety and anger and hopelessness and things. And so I thought, man, that's got to play some kind of role in the recovery. So I entered that into the equation, the outcome equation. And what I love about structural equations, it talks to you and it tells you, I mean, it doesn't symbolically, it doesn't speak in English, but like AI would, but it tells you about your data. And when I put that variable in, it said, David, I've got some information for you here. That variable is totally worthless. It tells me nothing. Once I know how they're felt at the beginning of the use of the app and how they're feeling 3 days later, the history of who was severe, who was not severe, everyone improved at exactly the same rate. And then another thing, so I published that in Psychology Today.
Wow.
And they made it a must read about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And they kind of promoted that article. And then I had a follow-up to show how it worked. I gave an example of a woman that had complex trauma her whole life, and I described how she recovered. I used to, once I offered to the psychiatric residents that I would treat severe patients once a week in a 2-hour session so they could see how TEAM CBT worked. And then I asked faculty people to send their worst patients, not worst, but most severe refractory patients to us. And I think Kim Bullock might have sent this woman to us, but she had a fantastic recovery. She had horrible trauma from childhood right up to her her old age. She was elderly, and she was planning to move to Portland so she could commit suicide legally. And she had this miraculous, effect. So I in just 1 2-hour session, and it was very moving. And so I wrote it up, and then they refused to publish the follow-up. They turned it down because they were saying I was claiming to have data on the treatment of trauma. And there's all this other people making other claims, and I have to have more data on that. And so it occurred to me about a week ago, I've got more data, a ton more data, because I had published 40 consecutive trauma patients in my book, Feeling Great. And I showed the data in the book. So I brought that into a follow-up article that they're considering now. They might reject it. But then I also realized I have data on how many of those 290 patients were self-diagnosed with PTSD or clinician diagnosed with PTSD. And so I was able to create 2 dummy variables in the database and bring them in. And again, ask AI, how did these patients do compared with all the patients without a history of trauma? And AI said, David, I got some news for you. They recover at exactly the same speed and to exactly the same degree. And so I said, well, here's some, why don't we call this article a new model for the treatment of trauma? And brought that new data in. I'm showing it in the Psychology Today article. Now, whether it gets published, it might have been a decision. It'll be any day I'll get the decision. But there's been exciting developments about how people change. And another thing, people were telling us, even when we had the 2023 app, one of the investors refused to invest. He says, "Oh, this wouldn't work for severe patients. This is for mild people." People love to discount things I've developed because it sounds so impossible. And so another thing we did in one of the recent articles, there's this thing called Cohen's D coefficient. And Cohen were a famous statistician, a married couple that wrote a brilliant book that I read years ago called Applied Multiple Regression and Correlational Analysis. And it was just fantastic. And they developed this way that you can compare scales, essentially, even if in different studies, using different scales, you can kind of standardize your scale and standardize the results. So I divided the data into the 50% who were the mildest and the 50% who were the most severe. And of course, the most severe, they were like hospitalized patients. And that was half of the 290 patients, the 290. The other half were mild or moderate or no depression, actually, initially. And then I asked AI to calculate the Cohen's D statistic for both groups. And the group, the mild group, it came out to a value of approximately 1.0. And if you look at all the outcome studies for digital devices, the greatest values have ever been 0.1 or 0.2. So it was 5 to 10 times more powerful than ever created for a digital than ever reported for a digital device. But the thing in the very severe patients, it was twice as big. It was 2 rather than 1. It was like 20 times greater than any digital device, or and much more powerful than any human therapy that's ever been reported, and did it in 3 days. Now with our new app, we can do it in an hour and a half. But the sad thing is there's not any interest in our app. Therapists don't want it. They think it's going to, hurt them in some way. Patients don't seem to be impressed. And we're going to go bankrupt in September, and we're not going to raise any more money. We don't want any more money. And we're going to go out of business. And I think these are the greatest breakthroughs in the history of psychiatry or psychology.
Well, it seems like the medical, like psychology, they resist change. Like like you're shaking up the whole field of psychology, and everyone's going to resist that.
Yeah, right. That's what's happening. I'm probably a poor promoter and challenging people too much or doing it the wrong way. But I think it's really sad. The one bright spot is I did present some of these data at the Evolution of Psychotherapy conference in December, which was a great honor. Mm-hmm. And they actually asked me to give the closing keynote address for the conference. And in the past, it's not as prestigious or big as it used to be, but it's at the Anaheim Convention Center, so it's a pretty big meeting. And at the end was on Wednesday. I went at the end of my keynote. I got a standing ovation. So that was, the first positive spark I've gotten from the academic community. But I don't think we have much of a chance of survival, and I'm really sad about it, because it's not only vastly beyond what other people can do. You can do this kind of work, Matt. You can compete with the app, but how many Matts are there out there of the 50,000 therapists I've
one too many
I've trained? We've got about a dozen of them. We've got a Rhonda and a Matt and some people who Jill Levitt who really got it. But and I think in the future, it'll probably, people are saying, how can they, what can we ask the app to do to help the therapists? And my question is, what could we ask therapists to do to help the app, if anything?
That's fantastic. And you explained that so eloquently. I'm glad we have it recorded. I'll probably have to go back and listen a dozen or so times before I actually understand a fraction of that. But I guess the two take homes for me is that in any given moment, what we are thinking is the thing that determines how we're feeling.
Yeah. And that is the past because of the fractal concept we have in psychotherapy, that at any moment, all of your problems are encapsulated in that 1, 5, or 10-second moment when you're upset and you're telling yourself, I'm no good, I'm not smart enough. Well, that's the same thing as when you were 3 years old, or 5 years old, or 7 years old, or when you had your trauma. So when you treat the present, you're already treating everything in the past. And when you understand the present moment, you understand the problems from the past. And when you change the present moment, you change the past. That's the truly incredible thing about this whole idea of fractal psychotherapy.
And we also change the future. Is that true? That if we're addressing the negative thinking in this moment,
you've got to do your 30 minutes of relapse prevention training to change the future.
Yeah.
None of us can be happy all the time, and that's something that Albert Ellis also believed. He wrote a paper on the impossibility of maintaining consistently good mental health. And he kind of poo-pooed that idea that you can achieve, nonstop happiness. And that's my own belief as well. But you can certainly learn the tools to break out of these bad moods when they descend on our heads, so you don't have to dwell for months in another long depression or anxiety or anger or whatever is your cup of negative tea.
That is excellent news.
Yeah.
I did. Speaking of medications where it's hard to know if hard to develop a placebo. So I did hear about one study on ketamine where they had a placebo control group, but they put everyone under general anesthesia, and so nobody actually had the trip experience, and so it was in fact a blinded study in that regard, and the 100% of the variance in response was determined by whether people thought that they had received active medication or whether they thought that they had received the placebo. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Yeah. Cool.
Well, you brought up relapse, and I know we're almost out of time, but we did have one question from Carlos about relapse.
Yeah, right.
And so maybe I could read that and we could answer that question.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Carlos sent you a bunch of different questions, and we'll probably finish them next week. But he wrote you, thank you for your research and contributions to TEAM CBT. My mother introduced me to this form of therapy in 2022, and it has been a big help in overcoming my extremely painful perfectionism and anxiety. Unfortunately, after graduating from university, I've begun relapsing once again. As such, I'd like to ask you, is it harder to get out of a relapse than the first time? I feel as if my relapse has been a lot trickier to get out of, despite the fact that I have more tools and techniques.
Well, the short answer is that if you've had relapse prevention training, and there's elements that we can summarize here, what they are, if you like. But if you've had the 30 minutes required for relapse prevention training, it'll be a lot easier to get out of your negative thoughts when they come back. If you haven't had relapse prevention training, and I would say 95% of patients have not, then it's going to be much harder, because when the negative thoughts come back, you're going to tell yourself, oh, I'm screwed. I'm worthless after all. The therapy didn't work. It wasn't deep enough. And the thoughts that'll make you want to kind of give up on things, as opposed to picking up the same tools and using them again.
Yeah, so I think.
But also if you have the expectation that you're going to relapse. See, after people recover, and of course, if you don't know how to make people recover, you can't do relapse prevention training, because you're such a sucky therapist that you can't treat people effectively in the first place, when I think most therapists are in that bag. But if somebody has improved, you have to know how to do relapse prevention training and jump right on it before you discharge them. And part of it is just to tell them, it's impossible to be happy all the time, and your negative thoughts are going to come back. And when they come back, it's going to be like falling into a hypnotic trance. I know, Matt, you've done a lot of fabulous hypnosis, and I know, Rhonda, you've taken a pretty extensive training in hypnosis as well. And I see depression as a form of self-hypnosis, that you're telling yourself and believing things that are absolute rubbish. Like, I'm a worthless human being. I'll be unhappy forever. Nothing I've ever done is worthwhile. I'm unlovable, and all these other ridiculous, distorted, cruel, unfair, mean-spirited thoughts. But you'll believe them like in a trance. And depression is like being in a trance. Your whole body feels it. And then when you recover, it's like waking up from a trance, and you suddenly see things differently, and you say, "Oh, how could I have believed that rubbish?" And you're in an enlightened state. But part of the problem is you say, "Oh, wow, my problems are solved forever. I'll feel like this, from now on," and that's not true. Because when you least expect it, those negative thoughts will come creeping back into your consciousness again, and then bang, it'll hit you much harder if you are not prepared for it. If you're prepared for it, you'll say, "Oh, Dr. Burns told me this was happening." I even record people talking back to their negative thoughts ahead of time. Like, I know what you're going to be thinking when you relapse. In fact, that's what we're going to do in the Tuesday group tonight. We had a beautiful work with a young woman from India, Hiral, who felt like she wasn't good enough, was beaten up on herself, and she had a magnificent transformation.
Right, and that's going to be our podcasts 498 and 499.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. That personal work with her.
Oh, yes, those two. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to do some relapse prevention with her tonight.
Great.
And that's critically important, because I'm not happy all the time, and bad shit happens. Oh no, I didn't say that. I don't use that word anymore, because Rhonda, who's gotten very prissy in her old age.
True.
And bad stuff happens to me a lot. People kind of think they can beat up on me because I'm, a public figure or familiar figure or whatever. I get 99%, rave emails and loving comments, but every now and then somebody hits me with a bomb. And, I get upset and angry and hurt, just like anybody. But I have some tools to fall back on. And I can imagine that the same might happen to you on rare occasion, Rhonda.
Oh, yeah,
and
that happens.
Maybe to you, Matt.
Maybe rare for Matt, but it's pretty common for me.
Happens to me as well. The relapse question is, I thought, a really good one, and I'm appreciating your answer a lot, David. Mm-hmm. One thing I've noticed in my work with patients is that when they're having a relapse and they're having a hard time getting out, and I look at what they've tried, almost all of the time the missing component is the motivational piece. That they'll do they'll do the daily mood log, they'll get the thoughts on paper, they'll identify the distortions, they'll try to come up with a positive thought, but they will forget somehow to do the like a cost-benefit analysis or some positive reframing. And that is probably the number one thing I see when people are not able to get out of the relapses on their own. But I totally agree with you that there will be a certain number of thoughts waiting for folks when they have that inevitable relapse that we can prepare them for in advance, especially the belief that this means that my relapse means the therapy didn't work and that those skills won't help me again. And if they realize, oh, that's just the part of the hypnosis, part of the trance of depression is going to get you that way. And so what do you have to do, knowing that that's going to be the case, is that you pre-commit to doing the exercises that worked for you, even if you feel completely hopeless. And when people make that commitment, then they're kind of relapse proof at that point.
I love that, Matt. That was beautifully stated.
Can I give you an example of that?
I love it.
So, I've had this driving phobia, and I worked with Werner Spitzvad, and it was part of the podcast sometime this year. Through 100% team therapy methods, I overcame my driving issues. Well, actually, that was the summer of 2025. And then a couple of weeks ago, I drove on a coastal road to visit some friends by myself. Going there wasn't so hard, but coming home, it was a steep downhill on the coast of California. And I thought I was going to go over the cliff. And I was driving.
It dark?
No, I wouldn't have done it if it was dark. And I wouldn't have done it if it was foggy. Nope. It was bright. It was 10 a.m. and there was no traffic. There was no pressure. But I had this thought, I'm going to go over the edge.
Oh, it sounds terrifying.
It was absolutely terrifying. I was probably driving 3 miles an hour. And if I could have stopped, I would have. But there was no way to pull over. And it was just absolutely terrifying. Anyway, obviously I made it home. But then the places that I'd previously been afraid to drive, that I had overcome, I was now afraid to drive them again.
Oh, yeah.
I had to go back to look at my notes and what worked before and what were the thoughts that I had. And then I filled out another daily mood log. What were my new challenging thoughts, and go through the techniques again that worked the first time. And happily, I overcame that relapse.
Nice,
but it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, relapse prevention with anxiety is equally important, but different and simpler, and at least in my experience. And the thing is that you have to just keep exposing yourself indefinitely to the thing that you're afraid of. And as soon as you stop doing that, then it'll start creeping back, just like you experienced. And it's just hell when it happens. Well, I'm getting an urgent signal that it's time to end today's podcast because I'm going to pee in my pants.
Okay, that's the signal.
When you get to be my age, that becomes significant.
Okay. Well, thank you, David, and thank you, Matt. I really appreciate you guys being here.
Tremendous pleasure.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Thank you. This was great. It was wonderful. Thank you so much, both of you.
Okay.
It meant a lot.
Yeah.
This was part 2 of a 1-part podcast.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.